Okay, so welcome. It's a bit dark and stormy today, and up until about 15 minutes ago, we had workmen, like 4 workmen in my kitchen trying to unplug the sink. So I was panicking a little bit, wasn't sure if we're going to be able to do it, but they got it in time. So the focus today is going to be some Sichuan dishes that we used to live in Beijing, and we used to go out for Sichuan at least once a week, probably more than that. So I'm going to start with, this one isn't traditionally Sichuan, but it's my own riff on it. It's going to be a cold spinach, like a starter. So the first thing I'm going to do is just blanch the spinach really quickly. Salt, and I just need to add some water and some ice. So this is basically going to be a cold dish that you would have at the beginning of the meal. And there's going to be spinach, wasabi, tahini, some soy, and a little bit of toasted sesame. All right. So in the same bowl where we had the spinach washing, then now that it's being able to blanch, then I'm going to stick it back into an ice bath. And this, I'm basically going to try and cook almost everything today in this wok, just to show that the dishes, Sichuan dishes, can look really complicated, but they're really quite simple and quite fast. Especially the main dish that I'll do is a fish dish called shui or water-poached, water-cooked fish. And that one looks terribly complicated, but it's basically a one-pot dish. I happen to have a beautiful piece of halibut that I got from Paleo Robbie. So I'm just going to get rid of this water here because I'm going to use this wok again. And I'm going to let the spinach cool down in this ice bath for now, and I'll drain it. But while I do that, I'm going to get started with green onion pancake. So I've already started with some that I've rolled out, but I wanted to show you how to start the dough. Now the dough requires at least 30 minutes to rest, so I'll show you how to start it, but obviously we're going to use dough that I've already done earlier today. Very, very simple. 2 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, and then we're going to add less than about 3/4 cup of boiling water to the food processor while it's going. And what it'll do is it'll cook the flour and bring it all together into a cohesive dough. The funny thing about this recipe is it's just the dough is really, really easy to handle because you don't really have to do much kneading with it. The heat from the boiling water does the work. So I'm going to pour 1 cup of boiling water into my measuring cup and then turn on the food processor, and you'll get to watch how it starts to clump together. It takes about 15 seconds. If we have the food processor plugged in. Okay, so all right, so you want to see how the dough's now clumped together. It's all in one mass. And then you don't really have to do much kneading. Let's keep in mind it's actually quite hot. So you'll knead it a little bit and then let it sit and rest for at least 30 minutes. You can actually have it rest for overnight in the fridge. It's up to you. But as I said, I like this recipe because the dough is really easy to work with. I find it just doesn't require much nurturing, which is really quite good because I've been baking a lot of bread recently, and certain certain bread doughs actually require a lot of work. So I'm just going to knead it just a little bit, and then I'll let it sit underneath a cloth. But I did keep one piece of dough from early on in the morning when I made one batch of this dough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out the onion pancake so that you can see the technique. So I'm pretty happy with the dough like that. I mean, when you let it rest, it'll become much easier to manage later on. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Stick this here. And then I have a piece of dough from before, from this morning. And I already rolled out 4 pieces, but you'll see I've got it on a floured surface, and it's just easier to work with after it's been resting for a while. So this one I probably did around, oh gosh, maybe 10:30 or so. And it's just been sitting at room temperature. And so what you want to do is roll it out so that it's about 8 inches. If you're wondering what 8 inches looks like, a lot of round cake pans are about 8 inches. So enough that, I mean, it doesn't have to be a perfect disc, because what we're going to do is we have a bit more rolling to do to get this onion pancake the way it needs to be. You'll notice there was no salt in the dough itself. It's just boiling water and flour. Okay, so next is, if I can find it. Can't find anything in my kitchen this morning, mostly because those workmen were in here. So what we're going to do next is brush some sesame oil. So this is dark roasted sesame oil. It's really fragrant. Onto the pancake, trying to get as many edges as we can. And if you've ever cooked or tried to make paratha, the Indian bread, this technique is similar to what they do. So you basically put the fat, you know, it would be butter if you're making paratha, and then into the dough, and then just snake it around, just like that, so that you get all these layers with fat and dough, and then you end up with a flaky pastry. There's probably going to be a little bit more flour on the surface. And like I said, there was no salt in the dough. In the recipe that I was looking at, it wasn't calling for salt because it was suggesting to have a sauce on the side. I don't know about you, but I never grew up really having a sauce for my onion pancake. I like onion pancakes the way they are. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt when we do the next layering, so that the onion pancake can stand on its own. And this is a really great thing to make. You want to do quite a few pancakes all at once, and then just stick parchment paper in between and freeze these. These freeze really well. Really good snack to have when you're just having a craving for I don't know, I consider this comfort food. So, okay. So one more layer of sesame oil brushed out. Okay, and then I'm going to add in green onions. You can add as much or as little as you want. If you add more, the only thing is the dough could get just a tiny bit soggy from the green onions, but it's all up to you. And I'm adding in a sprinkle of salt just to give some flavor. Okay, so I'm going to roll this up again. Okay. And then we'll roll it out one more time. We're doing good for time so far. A little bit more flour. And then I'm going to start cooking some of these pancakes while I make the next dish. So as I roll this out, the next dish is going to be a favorite of one of my old team members, but also for us too. It's a sour and spicy potato. And in the Sichuan restaurants in Beijing, where we used to go and eat, because we lived in Beijing for 4 years for me, 5 years for Dave, This potato dish is kind of funny because it has, the potato shreds are a bit crispy. They're not completely soft and cooked, but there's something comforting about that texture, at least in my opinion. So it's one of those dishes where I don't know why I don't make it more often, but I happened to get some deliveries for groceries and vegetables this week, and I got a lot more potatoes than I was expecting. It's been a bit unpredictable with the grocery deliveries these days. I've been trying to use a few different organic grocers. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my pan here. Hopefully you can see, and just add a little bit of oil. There's sesame oil within the pancake itself, so it doesn't have to be too greasy, but.
Is that light work?
Huh? No. No, this light does not work. So we're gonna let the pan get a bit hotter. But in the meantime, I can stick in pancake. So as it gets hotter, it'll start to sizzle, and what I'll do is I'll turn down the heat slightly so it doesn't burn. And then the layers of the pastry are going to come out, and we'll be able to see when we come to it. Okay, next one will be the potato dish I was talking about. This is pretty simple. So I've talked about the potato shreds. I used my handy mandolin to get these really fine shreds. And then the next thing will be, and this just takes literally just a few minutes. So there's different variations of this recipe. Some people use white vinegar, some people use black vinegar. It's really up to you at the end of the day. Some people don't really like the taste of black vinegar. I do, but what I'll do maybe just for today is I'll do maybe a combination of the black and the white vinegar just for the sour. So I'm just using rice bran oil. And what I've done is I've cut up a few cloves of garlic as well as these dried chilies that I got in the market. And these ones happen to be really big. So what I've done is I've just cut them up into bigger pieces. I mean, they're really to help flavor the oil. But yeah, I've never really seen dried chilies in Thailand this big before. I was kind of surprised when I picked them up yesterday. All right, so trying to get all that flavor from the garlic and the chilies into the oil. You don't want the garlic to get too brown. It's why I didn't mince up the garlic, and this time I sliced it. You guys know I love to use my garlic press. It just makes life so much easier. But for the purposes of this particular dish, I was looking just to impart the garlic flavor into the oil. And the other thing to note is that I had soaked the potato shreds in water first and tried to dry them as much as possible. So adding in some salt, of course. Now, in some recipes, because this is a Sichuan dish, it does call for adding in some Sichuan peppercorn at the beginning, that part where I was cooking with the garlic. I personally don't love biting into a Sichuan peppercorn. I find if you bite into one, and you get a numbing experience. So what I do is I'll make like Sichuan oil, just batches from time to time, and then that way you get the flavor. I'll show you a batch that I was working on this morning later on, and then that can give you a sense of what goes into it, and you can actually keep that oil to make many other dishes. The one that I had in mind that we won't have time for today, but I'll probably make for dinner tonight is cold Sichuan noodles, which Dave absolutely loves. Okay. So we've got a bit of the Sichuan peppercorn flavor, thanks to that oil. Needs a bit more salt. In some recipes, I've also seen variants asking for a soy sauce, but in the restaurants that I used to go to, you never really saw the potatoes served really, really dark. And that's why the use of the dark soy sauce, I'm kind of like, you know, I'd rather just go with a bit of the white vinegar, maybe a little bit of dark soy sauce or the dark vinegar just for the flavor, but not really that much. Okay. And you'll notice that I added in the vinegar at the end. Also because, you know, the vinegar, being vinegar, it will evaporate pretty quickly if you add it too soon. So you really want to get that punchy flavor. Oh, that just takes me back to lunch in Beijing. Look at our pancake here. Might be a bit too low. Okay, so just gonna dish this up. And the potato, just to explain, the texture is not like a hash brown. It's almost like still crispy in terms of it still has a little bit of that crunchiness from being a bit of a raw potato, but and that is a normal texture for this particular recipe. I think for some people, I'm just gonna rinse off my wok. All right, so I'm going to do two things now. Keep an eye on the pancake for one. I'm going to start on the shui zhu, which is water-cooked fish. At the same time, in between steps, we'll finish off the spinach dish. I'm going to leave this here. And again, shui zhu, water-cooked or water-poached fish, is something that it's quite fast, but it looks a lot more complicated than it is. So our pancakes are coming along. We could probably use just a teeny bit more oil. All right. Okay. So let's get this out of the way. Okay. So I already have here some sprouts that I put in water. In Beijing, where we used to eat, that's what they used to put as a vegetable. Although we've been to different places where they've had other vegetables. Cabbage being one of them, sometimes maybe some green onion. But for us, I'm just going to use sprouts. And it's really simple. So every layer, I'm going to use the same bowl that I had the sprouts in. And with every layer, I'm just going to dump whatever's in the wok into the bowl. So we start with the sprouts, and there's lots of them. I love sprouts, so no issues there. Okay, and our pancake is ready. So I'm just letting the wok get hot, and then we'll add on another pancake. And just keep cooking those. And eventually I'll do the other 4 pancakes later on this afternoon, and those will probably be the care packages for my neighbors today. If Dave lets me. Okay. More green onion. This is getting hot. Okay. And really for this, we're just trying to cook down the vegetable just a bit so that it's somewhat cooked. It'll cook a bit more as we add the water and the sauce. But for now, it's really just to make sure that we've got like a cooked vegetable at the bottom. Some salt. I've got some water boiling right now because that'll be the next component of this dish, since it is water-cooked fish. I'll drain my spinach. So just trying to get rid of that water from the spinach. And then eventually we'll just make up a sauce for this. All right, so sprouts are starting to wilt down a bit. Keeping an eye on the pancake. And you don't have to use this many sprouts. I actually just bought 2 packages because I haven't had sprouts in a long time while we've been in lockdown. But my goal has been to try and not repeat any vegetable or any dish. I think it's been 6 or 7 weeks now. All right, so sprouts go into the bowl. Don't have to be too messy. And then the next component will be the sauce. So, just checking up again on the pancake. So the main thing about the sauce, so you can buy packages to make this, right? And this is a much bigger version of what a package would make. You would usually have maybe for something like this, 200 grams of fish, and you get the little packages in there that help you make the sauce, as well as the marinade for the fish. For the fish, this is halibut, and I've marinated it in a little bit of mirin, some white pepper, and I've added some tapioca starch. So what we're gonna do is make the sauce first, which effectively is basically broth and chili bean sauce. So this is what I ordered on Lazada. I think it's called Tobanjian. But adding a big chunk of this. You can use this in a lot of Thai cooking too. And adding boiling water. Okay. And then I'm going to add in some fish sauce. So I want to make sure that the sauce, the broth, is sufficiently salty and flavored. So we need enough fish broth. So I'm using something called Better Than Julienne. You can get beef and veggie stock. You can get chicken. The turkey one is really good too. And I discovered it first in Mexico of all places. I think it's an American brand. But I find if I don't want to be filling up my freezer with homemade stock, which I still have lots of that, then that's a good substitution. All right, so it's sufficiently salty, but I will add in a little bit of soy. And then now it's just adding in the fish. So we can see it's up to a boil. The fish I also added in, if I didn't mention it, tapioca starch. You can also use cornstarch, and it just helps the fish to retain its texture, keeps it together. So I can get rid of this, and all of that that's cooking right now is going to get dumped into the same bowl. And because the fish has been cut into quite thin slices, it will cook rather quickly. And that's why in the Sichuan restaurants, this dish is very, very easy to do up. It doesn't take long as you have a beautiful fish. Most times in Sichuan restaurants in China, they tend to use freshwater fish. This one is salt water, being halibut, but you can use whatever you like. Really. The one that they like to use in Chinese is called huiyu, And there's also chow. There's two different types of fish. One has tiny, tiny, tiny bones, but is recognized as being very flavorful. And then the guyi is, the bones aren't as big and it's a lot easier to get around them. But some people argue that it's not as flavorful as the chow. Okay, so just testing the fish to make sure. Good. Okay. So into the bowl. All right. So now we've got that vegetable, we've got that beautiful fish. And now the last component, and we've got about 5 minutes left, so I still have to finish off that spinach. All right. And this is the part that in Chinese restaurants always looks a little bit like wasteful or impressive, you can say, is a whole whack of oil that is cooked with Sichuan peppercorn, infused with Sichuan peppercorn, if the heat was on, Sichuan peppercorn and chili. So those same chilies, those massive chilies, what I did was I ground them up a bit with some Sichuan peppercorn, about 3 tablespoons here. And that's going to infuse the oil. And usually there's like a good layer of oil on top, to be honest, in those restaurants. And so we'll let that sizzle, and in the end, that's gonna go on top of this. Now, in a Sichuan restaurant, you would just simply pour that entire mix on top of the fish and spreads. But I actually don't like, I've mentioned this before, I don't like fishing through my food to brush away the Sichuan peppercorn. So I'm going to do it over a sieve so that we don't have to be dealing with that. Okay. So let's finish off. Well, this starts to sieve, and also because I need this sieve. Okay, so to finish off the spinach, it's pretty simple. All you need is a little bit of tahini. Just keeping an eye on my pancake there, just give me 1 second. Look at that. Beautifully brown pancake. We'll let another one go. Okay, so a bit of tahini or sesame paste, and you can already start to smell the chilies mixing up with the Sichuan peppercorn. It smells amazing, actually. Although Dave might start coughing because he tends to be pretty sensitive when it comes to this stuff. I'm not sure I was allowed to say that, but I just did. Okay. A little bit of wasabi. This is my variant. So your wasabi is according to taste. I just found years ago that wasabi and tahini seems to go really, really well together. So I started making up this dish. It always seems like there's not enough spinach for us to have this dish. We need to buy more. And then my soy sauce. And so now the chilies are done. And what we're gonna do is pour. All right. So what you do is you end up with this layer of oil. You end up with this layer of oil that when you fish out the fish from the broth, it'll be coated in that chili and Sichuan peppercorn oil, and it'll have an amazing flavor. So just trying to make sure this is burnt. Okay, so back to the fish. A little bit of soy. Probably a little bit more soy. the last component. Okay. And then the last component is really toasted sesame seeds that I just toasted in a dry pan this morning. And the toasted sesame seeds will also go into my Sichuan peppercorn, oil. I have some extra green onions, so I'm going to throw that on top too. All right, and that's our cold spinach dish. If you want to make this ahead of time, the key thing is to blanch your spinach ahead of time and let it dry well. And then you can mix the sauce separately and make sure you just mix the sauce in right before you eat. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today, guys. We've got, we'll just review, we've got our scallion pancake. I'm still going to make one more. We've got our water cooked fish, shui zhuyu. Beautiful halibut. We've got our suanla tudosi, or sour and spicy potato shreds. And we have our spinach with wasabi, tahini, and toasted sesame seeds. And that's pretty much lunch for us. Dave's trying probably not to cough right now because of all the chilies. But yeah, I think just a little bit over half an hour this time, but there were a lot of dishes to get through. So thanks for joining. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, you can unmute yourself.
Yvonne, I have a question. It's Sanjeev here. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead.
So halibut, and what was the first, what do you call the first thing with the pancakes? What do you call it?
It's a scallion pancake, a green onion.
Scallion. Okay. I wasn't sure what the name was. Scallion pancakes and the halibut.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Anybody else? No questions? Everybody's hungry, probably? All right, well, thanks for joining, everyone. We will think about what to make next week. It always depends on what shows up in my grocery delivery. So it just so happened that I felt inspired to make Sichuan food